What if the giants of the Bible weren't just a myth? What if they were a terrifying reality, born from a forbidden union between angels and humans? This is the story of the Nephilim, a story that some believe still haunts humanity today. Long before the Great Flood wiped the world clean, the Book of Genesis describes an age of overwhelming corruption, a darkness so deep that it called for divine intervention on a planetary scale. But what was the trigger for this cataclysm? Genesis chapter 6 gives us a few cryptic verses that have sparked thousands of years of debate. It talks about the sons of God who looked upon the daughters of humans, and from their union, a new race was born. These beings were called the Nephilim. The text describes them as the heroes of old, men of renown. But what does that really mean? Who exactly were the sons of God? And who or what were their giant offspring? This isn't just some dusty old myth. It's a story of cosmic rebellion, a direct threat to God's created order, and a legacy of chaos that some think never truly ended. In this video, we're exploring one of history's most unsettling accounts, digging into the biblical text, ancient interpretations, and the nagging question of what happened to the giants of the old world. The story kicks off in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. It reads, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." The passage continues, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them." So, let's break that down. We have three distinct groups: the sons of God, the daughters of humans, and their children, the Nephilim. Identifying these groups is one of the hottest debates in biblical scholarship. Even the Hebrew word Nephilim is a bit of a mystery. It comes from the root word nephal, which means to fall. This has led many to translate Nephilim as the fallen ones. When the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek in a version known as the Septuagint, the word was translated as gigantes, or giants. That's where we get our popular image of these massive, powerful beings. The Bible makes it clear that their presence on earth coincided with a period of unimaginable wickedness. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 says, "The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time." The message seems pretty clear. The arrival of the Nephilim and the events surrounding them were directly tied to the corruption that led God to cleanse the world. They were a symbol of a world spiraling out of control, where the boundaries between the divine and the human had been catastrophically shattered. This short, haunting passage sets the stage for a story of judgment, but it leaves us with far more questions than answers. To find more detail, we have to look beyond the Bible to a book that was once incredibly influential, the Book of Enoch. If you're finding this dive into ancient mysteries as fascinating as we do, please take a second to hit that like button. It tells us you want more content like this and really helps the channel out. While it's not in most Bibles today, the Book of Enoch was a well-known and respected text in ancient Jewish and early Christian circles, and it gives a much more detailed and, frankly, terrifying account of the events in Genesis 6. According to Enoch, the sons of God were a group of 200 rebellious angels called the Watchers. Led by an angel named Semyaza, they made a pact on Mount Hermon to descend to earth, take human wives, and have children. This wasn't just an act of lust, it was cosmic treason. These Watchers abandoned their heavenly posts and began teaching humanity forbidden knowledge. One of their leaders, Azazel, taught humans how to make weapons and armor, as well as cosmetics. Other angels taught sorcery, astrology, and other secret arts. This flood of forbidden wisdom unleashed widespread corruption and violence.
But the most devastating result was the birth of their children, the Nephilim. The Book of Enoch paints them as monstrous giants. Some later and likely flawed translations mention truly absurd heights like 450 feet, which most scholars now believe are translation errors. Regardless of their exact size, Enoch describes them as having an insatiable appetite. First, they devoured all of humanity's food. When that wasn't enough, they turned on humans themselves. The text chillingly says they also began to sin against animals and even attacked each other, drinking one another's blood in a terrifying display of cannibalistic chaos. According to Enoch, the Great Flood was God's direct answer to destroy the physical bodies of these giants and wash away the Watcher's corruption. But the story doesn't end there. Enoch claims the disembodied spirits of the drowned Nephilim were condemned to wander the earth as demons, afflicting humanity until the final judgment. The ancient Book of Jubilees adds another layer to this tradition, claiming that the lead evil spirit, Mastema, was permitted to keep a tenth of these spirits with him to continue to test and trouble mankind. This entire narrative, though not biblical canon, provides the framework for the oldest and most widely held interpretation of Genesis 6. The mystery of Genesis 6 has led to three major theories over the centuries, each trying to make sense of the sons of God and the Nephilim. First is the fallen angels view. This is the oldest interpretation, supported by the Book of Enoch and held by many early Jewish and Christian writers. It argues that the sons of God were in fact angelic beings who sinned by procreating with human women. The Nephilim, then, were supernatural, part divine hybrids. Passages in the New Testament like 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 1:6, which talk about angels being cast into darkness for abandoning their proper domain, are often pointed to as support for this view. Critics, however, ask the obvious question: how can a spiritual being have children with a physical human? That question leads to the second theory, the Sethite view. This idea, which gained traction with theologians like Augustine, offers a purely human explanation. It suggests the sons of God were the righteous descendants of Adam's son Seth, while the daughters of men were the wicked descendants of his other son Cain. In this view, the sin wasn't cosmic, but cultural. The intermarriage between the godly and ungodly bloodlines corrupted the righteous line and produced tyrannical, power-hungry leaders, the Nephilim. While this theory avoids the supernatural problems of the angel view, it doesn't really explain why this specific union would create giants or men of renown. Finally, there's the Dynastic Rulers view. This minority opinion suggests the sons of God were powerful human kings who, like many ancient rulers, claimed divinity for themselves. They would have taken any women they wanted into their harems, and their children, the Nephilim, were simply their powerful warrior offspring who became famous through brute force. While this fits some cultural contexts of the ancient Near East, it has the weakest direct scriptural support, since the term sons of God is more often used for angelic beings in the Old Testament. But no matter which interpretation you lean toward, the idea of a primeval race of giants left a deep mark on the biblical story, one that didn't end with the flood. One of the most confusing parts of the Genesis account is the little phrase that says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. This suggests that giants existed even after the flood. How is that possible? The Bible doesn't spell it out, but it does describe several tribes of giants that the Israelites ran into when they entered the Promised Land. In the Book of Numbers, the 12 spies sent to scout Canaan come back with a chilling report. They claim to have seen the descendants of Anak, the Anakim, who they say come from the Nephilim. The spies were so terrified, they said, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This report sent the Israelites into a full-blown panic and rebellion against God. The Anakim was just one of several giant clans mentioned. The Bible also talks about the Rephaim, another race of giants. One of the most famous Rephaim was Og, the king of Bashan. Deuteronomy 3:11 describes his bed as being made of iron and measuring 9 cubits long. Using the standard cubit of about 18 inches, that would make his bed over 13 feet long, giving us a sense of his staggering size. And then, of course, there's the most famous giant of all, Goliath. The Masoretic text, the standard Hebrew version of the Old Testament, puts Goliath's height at 6 cubits and a span, a jaw-dropping 9 feet 9 inches tall. However, other texts, like the Greek Septuagint and some Dead Sea Scrolls, list his height as 4 cubits and a span, which is a more believable but still formidable 6 feet 9 inches. Whatever his exact height, Goliath was an intimidating champion from Gath, one of the last cities where the Anakim had taken refuge. His story is the final chapter of this giant theology in the Bible, where these powerful beings represent the forces of chaos standing against God's people. From the forbidden union of angels and mortals to the hulking giants who stalked the Promised Land, the story of the Nephilim is one of the most compelling and haunting mysteries of the ancient world. It's a story of rebellion, corruption, and a cosmic battle between order and chaos that runs deep through the biblical narrative. The strange account in Genesis 6, fleshed out by texts like the Book of Enoch, shows us a world where the lines between heaven and earth were dangerously blurred, leading to the birth of powerful hybrids who threatened all of creation. Their legacy, it seems, lived on after the flood through the giant clans of Canaan, forcing the Israelites to face their deepest fears and trust in a power greater than any giant. The story of the Nephilim serves as a stark warning about crossing forbidden boundaries and the corrupting nature of unchecked power. So we're left with a final, thought-provoking question. Were the Nephilim just a myth, a symbol of a corrupt age, or were they a terrifying physical reality whose influence echoes through history? What do you believe? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the Bible's greatest mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.